Namo Fudables, Damos, Fuda, Bosa. Let us celebrate the liturgy of the day. Let us share the peace. May all beings awaken to that peace which is our true home. Let us take refuge. I take refuge in the ground of being, within which I live and move and breathe. Let us make the accord. I take sanctuary in the heart of being, accepting all of my delusions, in thought, word, or deed, born of ignorance, hatred, and greed. Let us give thanks. I give thanks for all things, awakening to the interbeing of all nature. May my heart be open and my mind clear. May all be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, and may all come to know that peace which is beyond all understanding. Since it is the practice of enlightenment, that practice has no beginning. And since it is enlightenment within the practice, that realization has no end. For the Dharma talk this week, I wanted to talk about the mythology of Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddha that we tend to think of as the Buddha, right? Of course, in Buddhism, there are an infinite number of Buddhas, some of them very famous in different traditions, some of them not so much in others. But and of course, there's this thought that all of us are Buddha, or that we all will awaken fully, just like Shakyamuni Buddha, at some point. So, but this is specifically about the mythology of Shakyamuni, the one who sits under the tree and has an awakening experience, and then shares this with all of humanity, and leads us up to this very moment where I'm talking about him. Right? Specifically, I want to talk about a problem I had with the myth of the Buddha. When I first learned the sort of outline of the myth of the life of Siddhartha and his transition into the Buddha, I found it every bit worthy of every golden statue that exists of the Buddha, and why we revere him and why we think of him as so incredible and perfect, if I dare say. But then I learned more of the story, some details of the story, and all of a sudden I found those golden statues were a little bit like maybe not as golden, maybe not as shiny. And I wondered about it. What does this mean? Because, in a lot of traditions, the Buddha is seen as a being of perfection, right? That he was, there were prophecies that he would come. There were tales of his past lives of ever-increasing merit that lead to this inevitable conclusion where he is truly special in what he figures out for himself and then is able to share with us. And that he is something, truly, truly kind of next level special, right? I mean, statues kind of look that way, right? But if we look at the story, there are some things that knocked me around a little bit. So let's get into it. Very briefly, the legend of Shakyamuni Buddha starts about 2,700 years ago. There's a prince named Siddhartha. He lives in northern India, and when he's a child, or when he's very, very small, or maybe it's even before he's born, there's a prophecy that he will grow up to either be a holy man or a great leader. And upon hearing this, his father, Suddhodana, King Suddhodana, has pretty good ideas of which direction he'd like his son to take, right? He wants him to be king. So in order to keep him away from the holy man path, he essentially imprisons him in the palace walls. But it's not so bad. He gives him every luxury imaginable. He gives him every material possession he could ever want and every experience he could ever hope to have, just as long as it's within the palace walls, right? But, he's hoping to kind of keep him happy until he's old enough to take over the throne and become the great leader, not the holy guy. So that works fine for about the first 29 years or so, but then Siddhartha is getting a little scritchy about things. He has questions about life. He's not feeling really great about, where he is and what his life looks like, and he's very, very curious about what is outside of the palace walls. So he sneaks out of the palace with his friend Chana, chariot driver, and they take a very famous chariot ride outside of the palace walls. And it's here where Siddhartha encounters what become known in the mythology as the four sights. The first of the first three sights are an old person, a sick person, and a corpse on their way to a funeral pyre. And Siddhartha has no experience with any of these three. He has no understanding of what it means to be old, ill, or dead. And not only does he have no experience with what that is, he has no idea yet that that's going to happen to him too. So when he sees these, and when Chana kind of helps him to understand, oh no, man, this is coming for all of us. All of us will get old. All of us will experience illness. All of us will die someday. It floors Siddhartha. He doesn't know what to make of it. He doesn't know what to do. They come upon the fourth sight, and the fourth sight is a holy man, a mendicant. And it's at this sight where he understands, wow, there's a potential way out of this suffering, that there are people out there trying to find it, searching. There's a possibility here that I could escape this horrible fate of getting old, illness, and death. And so, upon seeing this fourth sight, Siddhartha renounces the throne. He makes the choice for the holy man, and he heads out into the wilds to try to find an answer. And for 7 years, he wanders the countryside of northern India, trying to find some answer to the end of suffering. And he goes through all sorts of very, very difficult and ever-increasing ascetic practices, where he nearly starves himself, and he winds up looking like a zombie, right? There's some statues of him in this way, and he looks literally just a skeleton, right? And finally, his body gives out, and he collapses. And a little girl named Sujata, who actually thinks he's a ghost at first, he looks that bad, takes pity on him, has compassion for him, and gives him a little rice and milk. And upon receiving the little tiny bit of sustenance, and in great appreciation, he realizes, I gotta find another way, because this starving myself thing is not doing it. So Siddhartha resolves I'm going to sit under this fig tree over here, and I'm going to meditate until the answer comes to me. And as the mythology goes, he sits there, and after a time, 49 days in the myth, he sees the morning star, the star of Venus. He has his great awakening. He is now the Buddha, although he doesn't call himself that. He calls himself the Tathagata, the Tathagata, excuse me. And even that is, he runs into four guys, they don't even recognize him, even though they were fellow monks. Who are you? And he says, I am the gone thus forth. I am the Tathagata. It's only us that call him the Buddha afterwards. And he goes on to teach for the rest of his life and share his the wisdom he has learned in his own awakening so that we may awaken too. And that is an incredible story. And it's a true hero's journey, right? Right out of Joseph Campbell, Star Wars and Marvel movies, right? It's the journey of somebody becoming the hero, becoming the thing that they really are meant to become, and being able to do something really, really transformational for all of us with it. It's a story worthy of every single golden statue there is of the Buddha. But if you dig into the details a little bit, I left a couple of details out. These details were the ones that kind of I struggled with. First, Siddhartha was married, when he left. Her name was Yasodhara, and there are poems about Yasodhara being absolutely heartbroken when he left. Not only that, Yasodhara gave birth to their one and only child, a son, Rahula. And in some versions of the myth, she gives birth to Rahula on the day that Siddhartha leaves. Now, I'm sure what is happening for me here in this story is a whole bunch of modern day judgment on a guy that lived in a completely different culture 2,700 years ago, and there's probably all sorts of wonderful, justified, cultural, important reasons why he did what he did, why it was okay. But as a guy in 20-something, when I first learned it, reading this, I'm thinking, the dude abandoned his wife and kid. The venerable, world-honored Buddha who people all over the world celebrate and, dare I say, worship, ditched his wife and kid on the day his kid was born. Who would do that? I have words for people that do that. Judgmental, horrible words for people that just up and leave their wife and kid on the day the child is born. And those words are anything but perfect. Now, as the mythology continues, they are eventually reunited after Siddhartha awakens to the Buddha and he starts his community. Yasodhara, his wife, actually becomes a nun in the community. Rahula, his son, becomes an adept pupil and eventually is enlightened himself. And they hang out and they are with the Buddha. But man, if I couldn't shake that thing. Yeah, I'm glad that they got back together again, but for at least 7 years, he wasn't there. He was no father. He was. I know people whose fathers ran out on them. I know what that feels like to those people. I know it very well. And so how do I reconcile this? This is a paradox. How can the world-honored, venerable Buddha, who I too have found such tremendous change in my own personal life based on his teachings and the principles and psychology of what he taught, be the guy who abandoned his wife and kid? How could it be? Some time ago, Sensei Tony helped me work my way through it. First and foremost, he helped me to look at the story without so much judgment. Let's first and foremost, let's look at it with compassion and see if there's something we can make out of this that is helpful instead of just sentencing Siddhartha and doing what the ego self does, right? The ego self is a world. My ego self, everybody's, but mine in this case, there's a world of either or. We are either the Buddha or you're a jerk. Like either you're worth listening to or I don't want to hear a thing you have to say, right? Like it's very difficult to have this both and true self experience as we often talk about in our Four Directions system of mindfulness, that maybe maybe things aren't always so black and white. And what Sensei Tony suggested is, what if we were to look at that fourth sight differently? Instead of, in multiple versions of the story that I read, that fourth sight, the wandering mendicant, is always presented as an inspiration. He sees the wandering guy, there's a way out of suffering. I will go into the wild now and I will find the end of suffering and I will bring it back to all so that humanity can be saved. The music happens and off we go. But what if we were to look at it from a very, very human perspective? What if we were to strip it all away and look at Siddhartha as a human? And what if we were to tell the story like this? There was a kid, because when I'm 49, so I can say this. When you're in your 20s, you're still pretty much a kid. Like I feel still pretty much like a kid. But there's a lot of the world to still experience and learn. There's a guy in his 20s, kid in his 20s. He's going through an existential crisis, so much so that he kind of does something kind of forbidden. He escapes the palace walls to try to shake himself free of it. And he encounters something that makes it even worse. He encounters these things, aging, illness, death. He's never seen them before. Now he's like completely floored. And then he finds out that his wife is pregnant. He doesn't know how to handle anything about life. He doesn't know what he's going to do. So he panics. And in a moment of desperation, he just says, "I'm out," and he runs away. And in our system of mindfulness, we align this with a type of eruption that we can all have, fundamentalist reaction, where we find meaning in life by projecting ourselves into some kind of group or political ideology or spiritual something that can kind of replace the pain that we have. And we, instead of actually dealing with the things that we need to deal with, we put all of our belief in this thing that is outside of us. And what if that's what he did? What if Siddhartha did something super duper human? Instead of being like the vision of perfection, the prophecy, the hero that was always born to come, what if he was just a guy that was going through a lot of struggles and he runs away? And, not or either, but he works it out. He goes through a lot of time trying to find an answer until eventually he sits under this tree. And, of course, the legend of the Buddha is it's a battle under the tree. The demon Mara comes and throws everything there is at him. Lust and anger and greed and power and riches. And he tempts the Buddha with everything. And in the grand myth of the Buddha, he turns all of these into showers of lotus petals that fall gently to the sky. But what if we think of it in a real way? What if under that tree he sees himself clearly and he sees what he did and he knows that, like every human, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I do things that I don't feel good about. I regret, just like you do. And he works them out. He mindfully works them out. And he finds himself at a place of real, transcendent love for himself and for everyone. And awakens to infinite compassion for himself, for everyone. And this is really the cornerstone of the awakening of the Buddha. What if that's it? Because if that's it, then anybody could do that. The legend Buddha, the perfect Buddha, it's beautiful, and the statues are are really awesome, right? I have them and I love them and I look at them and I get something emotional from them. But I get wisdom from them too, right? But they also, there's a temptation for those things to become idols, to become something we worship. And all of a sudden, the Buddha isn't something, this Buddha nature, this seed of enlightenment that we all carry within us, starts to look like something that, well, maybe, but probably not me, right? That's something for special people under special circumstances. And I'm distanced from the idea that I can awaken to, that you can awaken to. If I see the story of the Buddha, however, as a story of an imperfect person who is able to mindfully see themselves in the world and life clearly and have an experience of true transformation, then that means anybody can. Anybody can. I can. The kid at the drive-through window, the embezzling CEO, the stay-at-home mom who drinks too much, the Catholic priest who abuses kids, the political leader who does more harm than good. All of us are Buddha. All of us can awaken. All of us, we are never defined by some aspect of our history, by some perceived notion of what we should be in our future, or by any kind of existing horrible description or definition we or anybody else may put on ourselves. We all truly have Buddha nature and can awaken, can overcome those definitions and bring infinite peace and light to not only ourselves, but to everyone. I choose to go with this version of the Buddha's mythology. To me, that is, while certainly very modern telling of it, it's one that makes sense to me. And ultimately, Buddhism is about, in my opinion, it's about what works. It's about the teachings that will actually be helpful to make my own personal experience here something beautiful and filled with love and with compassion, so that I can then turn that over to everyone around me and maybe bigger, right? That I can create this universe or world out of love based on what I realize for myself and my own heart is true. And I think that's what's going on here. I hope that was helpful. The moment we receive true and trusting, solid and clear like a diamond, infinite light and life embrace and protect us, liberating us completely. Let us take the 4 immeasurable vows. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to liberate them. Delusions are endless. I vow to end them. The ways of compassion and wisdom are boundless. I vow to embody them. The way is unattainable. I vow to attain it. Let us take the precepts for the community of the Bodhisattvas vow. I allow my true self to manifest in all aspects of life. I take complete responsibility for my own life and all of my actions. I affirm my personal being and acknowledge it as a path to awakening and freedom. I embrace all aspects of my personal being, including my shadow, so that they may be transformed. I affirm an attitude of openness to my true self, even in the midst of suffering. I'll now chant the Nembutsu while you're welcome to offer incense at your home altars, if you have one, and otherwise feel free to join me, followed by a brief period of silent meditation of zazen, abiding. Remembering that we never practice alone or merely for ourselves, let us offer the merits of our practice by reciting the Bodhisattvas Gatha. We dedicate this practice to the welfare of all beings through space and time. May it be so.